Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming along today. We're going to have our session on immigration options following graduation. And I'd like to welcome Latitude Law. So we have Joel and Javier from Latitude Law today delivering this presentation. It is being recorded and we will make this available after the session is finished. Please do post any questions in the Q&A section, and those will be addressed when the Q&A portion of the session comes up. So over to you both.
Hello everyone. My name is Javier. I'm a senior caseworker at Latitude Law, and we will be delivering the presentation with my colleague Joel, associate solicitor. We will be basically discussing the general routes and general options that international students might have after graduating. And we will also have a session where we will go through your questions. We'll try to keep it as generic as possible. If any of your questions is sort of particular or you need any specific advice or legal advice, we will also leave our contact details. You can feel free to reach out through email or phone call, and we can just arrange for an initial consultation if you wish. The options after your student visa, we have separated them in two different sort of like main avenues. The first one is if you completed your course, and the second one won't require you to complete your course, the course you're studying at the moment. So the moment you complete your course, you have two main options. If you have successfully completed your course, you can go to the graduate visa. I'm sure you all have done some kind of research, so you know about this already, but in summary, the graduate visa allow you to remain in the UK for some time while after completing your studies. Yeah, basically, you also have the option of a skilled worker visa and others. So for the graduate visa, as you can see there, is open to all international students who have successfully completed an eligible course or to a bachelor's degree level or above. Then, depending of the specifics of your studies, you will be able to remain for 2 years or 3 years if it's a PhD. This will be reduced from 1st of January 2027. Instead of 2 years, it will be 18 months for applicants that are not PhD students. Then graduates, we have mentioned that graduates cannot extend the visa and will not qualify previously if they have previously held permission under the doctorate extension scheme. So it's not something that you will be able to extend indefinitely. You will need to switch eventually if you want to remain in the UK. And this route also doesn't lead to settlement. That's also really important. The time you spend lawfully in the UK as a graduate can be considered towards other applications, but it's not an application that has a specific route to settlement. You usually need to meet the validity, suitability, and eligibility requirements. Yeah, please, sir. The validity requirements, this is basically doing the correct form, applying, paying the correct fee, the relevant fee for the graduate visa. You can see there. You also have to enroll your biometric information. This is basically a picture of yourself and your fingerprints. This is usually done on a biometrics appointment, or nowadays can also be done through an app if you have like a chipped passport. Yeah, other supporting evidence, you will need to provide proof of your identity, nationality, obviously your studies, that you have completed them, that you have been previously granted permission as a student. Yeah, a decision should be within 3 to 8 weeks from the biometric enrollment, and there is no priority service. Then the suitability requirements, this is more about any previous issues with immigration, any previous convictions, any type of issue like that, or maybe issues with your character, maybe fines, things like that, might give you issues in the suitability stage. There is also others that we have noted, for example, any debts with the NHS, things like that. Then the eligibility requirements, this is a point-based application, similarly to the skilled worker applications. This is, you need to score a certain amount of points, and you need to be awarded 70 points in this to be successful in eligibility. That is basically divided in successful completion of your course. This course must meet the qualification requirement, must be to a certain level. And you also must have studied in the UK, like physically present in the UK for at least 12 months. Then the successful completion in particular, this is the first thing you need to show is that your sponsor, the university, has a tracking record of compliance. Obviously, Lancaster University meets this requirement. There's nothing you should do to meet this part of the requirements. You must have successfully completed and studied a course during this last grant of permission of studies. So with your study visa, you need to finish what you have been sponsored to study. And if you are permitted to change the course of study without a fresh application, you must have completed the course to which you changed, so the most recent. Something as well really important is that the university must verify, they must notify the UKVI, the Home Office, that you have successfully completed the course. So the qualification requirement, this is this is the degree level or the studies level of the studies you have completed and you will use for your graduate application. This can be a UK bachelor's degree, a postgraduate degree, and there are also other relevant qualifications. We have included some examples here. For example, a law conversion course, a legal practice course, bar practice course. So basically something that allows you to practice some certain professions. You must have secured that qualification during your last grant of study permission, as I was saying earlier. And unless this last grant of permission was undertaken under the student union sabbatical officer, so this is some specifics that I might recommend maybe reaching out for advice in these situations. The study in the UK requirement, this is about being physically present in 12 months in the UK. So basically, if the length of the course you have been sponsored to study for is of 12 months or less, you must have been in the UK for the full duration of the course. But if it's longer than 12 months, at least 12 months, you must have been in the UK. So for example, if you do 1 year out of 3 abroad, it's not a problem because the other 2 you should be in the UK. But yeah, if you think this is an issue, you feel free to reach out to us and we can have a chat about your specifics. The conditions of a status, this is the rights and obligations you will have as the visa conditions, basically, you will have as a graduate. If you're successful, you will be given permission to remain in the UK for 2 years, unless the application is made after 1st of January on or after 1st of January 2027, that it might be 18 months unless you are a PhD or other doctoral qualification, that it will still be 3 years. Then you will have the right to work, so you can engage in employment, self-employment, voluntary work, you can be paid, you can have a national insurance number if you don't have one. What you cannot do, you cannot work as a professional sports person with this visa, and you cannot access public funds, you cannot ask for benefits. You can study, but this cannot be a course suitable for sponsorship as a student. So maybe a small course or some training course, things like that, you can do it, but the limit will be studies that are subject to a sponsorship. Then family members, what happens with your family members when you are applying as a graduate? So your partner and your children, if you have, they can join, they can be sponsored as well. Sorry, they can be your dependents as on the graduate. They will need to meet the relationship requirements. So basically, you will need to provide evidence that they are your family, that they are your partner, through a marriage certificate that you are your children, through a birth certificate, and the relationship must have been genuine and subsisting. They must have been your dependents as well on the student period. You must intend to live together in the UK, and you must not intend to stay in the UK beyond any permission that is granted to the partner. Then, dependent children, they must be under 18. They cannot be adults. They must not be leading an independent life, and there must be ongoing suitable care arrangements for them in the UK, and you will need to show that as well. Then the benefits, just a little bit of benefits about using the graduate route when you finish. This permission is specifically designed to build up experience and build up employment experience, and it allows you to have more freedom in the UK in terms of which work do you want to do. This is preferred by some employers for this reason, because there are no salary requirements or things like that for a graduate. They can, well, obviously the employment regulations, but it's not like a skilled worker that you will have a minimum salary to get the sponsorship. And then it also allows you to switch to another immigration category. So it's pretty flexible in that sense when you're a graduate, to switch to maybe a skilled worker, maybe a partner option. Yeah, documents. This is just a brief summary of documents you might need for a graduate application. You will need your valid passport, so your e-visa. You will need a copy of the certificate of acceptance of studies that you use for your student visa application. You will need evidence that you have completed your studies. If you are on a scholarship or a sponsorship, you will need a letter confirming that they consent for you to do the application. And then what I was referring to before, the documents regarding your family relationships, marriage certificate, birth certificates. And yeah, we have here some Q&A, really frequently asked questions for graduates. Can students submit graduate visa application before receiving the final results? So basically, the student sponsor, this is the university, they must notify the UKVI that you have completed your studies at the date of application. So if UKVI don't receive that notification, usually UKVI contacts the sponsor to request this confirmation. But if you do this before you have received the final approval and final checks from the university to do this application, this will usually delay the application, because they won't progress it until they have this acceptance from the university. The second question is more or less a follow-up of the first one. Is advisable to submit before the course fees have been paid. So the completion of the studies always require the full fees to be paid. So basically that's it. You will need to be careful of that as well. What if the name of the course has changed? If the course and the content is the same and it's just a name, a matter of naming, this will be acceptable. This should be explained as well, but it shouldn't lead to any issues. Can I travel outside the UK after I have completed my course, but before I submit my graduate visa application? So you should be able to travel, because provided you still have permission and you still have a valid visa. But if the course completion date, the date you completed your course, is way earlier than the date that is on your certificate of acceptance of studies, there is a risk that the Home Office curtails your leave. And if that happens while you're outside the UK, it can lead to some issues. So yeah, it's something to consider and to be careful with. Yeah, now I've finished with the graduate visa part, so now my colleague Joel will lead with the skilled worker part, and yeah, we will have some time for questions at the end.
Great. Thanks, Avi. So I'm going to talk about skilled worker, and then I think, if I remember the slides, I'll briefly talk about some family-based options as well before we get to the Q&As. Skilled worker ultimately is where the graduate route is leading, but you don't need to be a graduate first. You can move straight to the skilled worker visa. The key differences are you need a job offer from a company that holds a license. The job has to be a sufficiently skilled role, so capable of sponsorship, and then your salary has to be sufficiently high, and that's based on what's called the salary threshold that we will cover, and also the specific job that you do. So if you have the option, do skilled worker. It's a route to settlement. It is a better role overall, but don't panic if you don't have a skilled worker option now. The point of the graduate visa is to allow you a few years of experience in the UK job market so that you can secure a suitable job. So the key change then is you need the offer of sponsorship. You can't do this on your own. And then that 5-year route to settlement. There are changes coming from April this year and onwards. We don't yet know what they will be. They're not finalized, so I'll try and cover them as they become relevant to this. So validity is very similar to the graduate route. So if you've got permission as a student, you need to have completed your course. The difference between the skilled worker and the graduate route is the wording successful doesn't exist in the skilled worker. So in theory, you can actually fail your course, but still become a skilled worker. If you failed your course, you cannot become a graduate. The alternative options there, conditions B and conditions C, are that you are applying essentially after starting your course, and you can apply before you've completed, but you can't start work until you've completed. What used to happen a few years ago is someone would enter as a student, and then in their first year of study, they would apply to become a skilled worker, for example. And these changes now prevent that. You need to complete the course that you're studying before you can start work as a skilled worker, but you can apply before you complete your course. So if you're going to complete in June and they want you to start in August, there's no reason you can't apply in May, have everything lined up and ready to go, so that as soon as your course completes, you can start. Category C there refers to PhDs, and essentially you need to have done 2 years as a PhD student before moving across to the skilled worker route. So eligibility, we talk about the points-based system. True points-based systems allow you to score points from all sorts of different sources. So it's not really points-based. It is a mandatory system. So you need sponsorship, you need skill level, you need English, and then they talk about tradable points, but they're not really tradable. So sponsorship is nice and easy. A company that holds a license wishes to sponsor you. You will most likely have certificates of application of acceptance for study, a CAS. The sponsorship for a skilled worker is very similar. It's called a COS. It looks broadly the same as what your CAS will look like. That's nice and easy. The job being at the appropriate skill level, there is a big list. They're called SOC codes. You can Google them. There's a big list of jobs that can be sponsored. And what you do is you find the most appropriate code for what you're going to be doing. And if it's in the list that can be sponsored, brilliant, you'll get your 20 points. English language, if you are completing a degree in the UK, should be very easy because you can use your degree to satisfy the requirement. If you have failed your course for whatever reason, or you're switching early as a PhD student, you need level B2. Okay, that's increased from level B1. So you may hear people talking of B1. That's no longer the case. So we've gone through sponsorship, we've gone through the appropriate level, we've gone through English language for the mandatory, and then tradable points. So realistically, what we're talking about is salary. This is quite important for the discussion that you have with your employer. So the most straightforward option is what's called the salary threshold. So option A, the minimum, if you're using option A, is the 41,700. But if the job you are being sponsored to do is more senior, it will have a going rate that is higher than 41,700. And it is the higher of the two. So some jobs will have a going rate of, for example, £30,000. In that case, you need to be paid 41,700. Other jobs will have a going rate of, say, £50,000, and in that case, you need to be paid the £50,000. That's based on a 37.5-hour working week. So if you're going to be working longer, you need to be paid more. If you are going to be working fewer hours, you can be paid less to a minimum of that 41,700. You can't say, oh, I'm being paid 20 hours a week, so you only have to pay me 30,000. If you're working less than 37.5 hours a week, your annual salary must still meet the salary threshold. Option B that you can see there, so PhDs that are relevant, you get a bit of a discount. That's to the going rate or the salary threshold. So they both come down, and you will see that on the list of jobs, those SOC codes, if you Google them, they have these options next to them. So a bigger deduction if you have a PhD in a STEM subject. Okay, you get 80% off. There used to be something called the shortage occupation list, essentially jobs that we have a desperate need for in the UK. Things like nurses, for example, were on there. Quite a lot of the kind of science STEM roles are still on there. That's now called the immigration salary list. Again, you can Google it to make sure if your job is on there, but essentially you get a lower salary as a result because we need those roles in the UK. You get a lower salary and a lower threshold. Option E is the most likely to be relevant to all of you because it applies to people who hold leave as a student. You can see there that the threshold, instead of the 41,700, is 33,400 pounds, or 70%. So it's quite a significant discount. And what you will find is that if you're going for a job, they may say, we really like you, but we can't pay you 41,700 pounds a year. Okay, it's too much. We're too small, or everyone else at your level isn't earning that. It's not feasible. You can use this and you can show them that as a new entrant, you will be eligible for that lower salary. There are some caveats. You can only be a new entrant for up to 4 years, and your time as a graduate counts towards those 4 years. Okay. You have to be under 26 or you have permission as a student. So those are some lists, basically. Sorry, these aren't our slides, so we're seeing what comes up just as you are. But there you go. So some further information. Essentially, you can be a new entrant. So if you look at the second bullet point, for example, if you were studying to qualify as a lawyer or as an accountant, you could qualify as a new entrant under those reasons. And then permission as a graduate, that third bullet point, you can still be a new entrant even after graduate leave has expired. So this would be for an entry application. Okay, if it was your most recent grant. So let's say your leave expires, you leave the UK and you look to come back within those 2 years, you could still qualify as a new entrant. And it's a very good thing to try and be able to go under, because once you are in work, it's easier to extend your visa than it is to get your visa in the first place. So these are the benefits. So again, if you're going to a job interview, if someone is saying, oh, we're not sure we can afford to employ you, these are your kind of responses. So the lower salary, they get to essentially test whether or not they want to bring you on a more permanent basis. Okay, they can give you that shorter offer of employment, and you will find that a lot of employers are looking for new entrants rather than kind of a full paid skilled worker. So it may give you an advantage over a more experienced candidate. Health and care workers. So these used to be brought under skilled worker fully. They've now been split out separately. They have a much lower salary requirement that you can see there. There are also quite a few downsides to applying for this visa, but if you are absolutely stuck, you can't do anything else, but you want to stay in the UK, this is an option, but you'll see it has some very serious implications for things like sponsoring family or bringing family or keeping family over with you. So the financial requirement will apply to all skilled worker applications. If you've been in the UK for at least 12 months, most of you will are the students, it's automatically met. So you show your visa status, you show your residence, no problem. Otherwise, you need to hold some savings for at least 28 days. The criminal record only applies to some roles. Don't go and get criminal records from your home countries as standard, depending on what you're doing. And you need to think about things about safeguarding and vulnerabilities, but also things like national security. So if you're going into a kind of a physics, nuclear, STEM related subject, you may be needing to provide criminal records, things like that. You will usually get 3 or 5 years of sponsorship. If you're going into academia, you'll often find you get a single year. And all you need to do is at the end of your status, you simply apply again with the continued sponsorship of your employer. If you get a grant of 3 years, you still need to reach 5 years to settle. It's not that you can settle after 3 years because that's what you were sponsored for. So you'll often find a grant of 3 years followed by a grant of 2 years. You can't access public funds, neither can your dependent family. This can be particularly problematic if you end up losing your job as a result of ill health. For example, we have quite a few clients where they've been sponsored, they've been working, and then they fall ill, they're unable to work, they lose their income, they cannot access public funds. So that is something you just need to be aware of, potentially hold some savings back for a rainy day. You can do supplementary employment up to 20 hours a week, but you must still be doing your main role. If you lost your job, for example, you can't just say, oh, well, I'll continue doing 20 hours a week. If you are not doing your main role, you can't do any supplementary employment either. And what we've seen in the past is people being told, oh, we'll give you a job, 0 hours contract ultimately, but you can just do your 20 hours anyway. The main role stops. The main role is either withdrawn or there was never a genuine job there in the first place. If you continue to do your 20 hours a week, you'll be working illegally, and that's hugely problematic. Voluntary work is permitted. Voluntary work is always permitted. Javi, I'm just putting you on mute. There's some background noise, that's all. Be very, very careful with voluntary work and volunteering. The rule really is that you can volunteer. Voluntary work is only permitted if you have the right to work. So if at any point you're not sure, do check. You can study similar to your 20 hours a week, though it cannot get in the way of your main job. And if your main job falls away for whatever reason, you should stop studying because ultimately your visa status is at risk. The changes to settlement, as I said, they're potentially coming in this year. We don't yet know what they will be, but we suspect the 5-year route will move to a 10-year route with what are sort of referred to as buyback provisions. So if you earn a certain amount of money, you can buy back a certain number of years towards settlement. If you work in a particular role, you can buy back further years. If you have a higher level of English, you can buy back more time. And the idea is that under certain conditions, you will buy back 5 years. So you will settle after 5 years, but if you're not earning enough, if your English isn't good enough, if you're in a particular role that is deemed less necessary, your settlement route might be 10 years. The other thing to consider with this is once those changes are implemented, we expect the 10-year route to settlement to fall away as well. So you can't say, oh, well, it doesn't really matter if it's a 10-year route because I've studied for 5 years, so I'll be a skilled worker for 5 years and then I'll settle. We think the 10-year route to settlement will simply stop existing and you will need a specific route that you have completed. So there is that to consider as well. The general advice is apply for settlement as soon as you're able, because we don't know what changes are coming in the future. So this is what you need. You'll be able to see the slides. They'll be shared with you. So that's what you need. This is not a conclusive list. This is a general list to be aware of. And then the work conditions, as we've said. So part-time, 20 hours. This is as a student. So your 20 hours a week during term time. Term time will be listed on your CAS. So if you're not sure if you're in or outside of your term time, refer to your CAS. A key thing for students is that even if you are permitted to work full time, you cannot have a permanent role. So you'll need to be on a temporary, usually 1-year contract. And then as soon as you are moving to the graduate or the skilled worker route, you can have a permanent position. Students also can't work as self-employed or start their own business. And that's relevant if you're thinking about the innovator option or the global talent option. While you're here as a student, you cannot form that business. So it's a reason to consider the graduate route, which will allow you to set up that business or work as a self-employed person to get the evidence you need for the innovator or global talent routes. So when, as a student, can you work full time? So once you've completed your course, you can go full time, but you can have a permanent role only once you've made a valid application for skilled worker or graduate. So you don't need to wait for the decision. Once you've submitted that valid application, you can then go full time and permanent. Up until that point, your contract should be fixed term or temporary. And that's quite important. So you'll need a new contract of employment once your application is submitted. Some FAQs then. So every company that holds a sponsor license is listed at that link that you can access. It's not a nice link. I think it used to certainly be a big Excel spreadsheet. But what you can do is if you find on LinkedIn or Indeed or wherever you're looking a job offer that looks promising, you can check that employer against the list of sponsored workers. If they are not on that list, we can help them get a license. They can get a license themselves. It takes probably about 3 months. So if you're really, really desperate, if you are looking immediately for a new visa, a company that doesn't have a license is no good for skilled worker. But if you are a graduate, if you've got a year left on your student visa, for example, and they need to obtain a license, they should have time to do so. So that second link there that I think Nolene has very helpfully put in the chat, if anyone wants to copy and take them from there. These are the skilled occupations. So these are the SOC codes that I referred to, the big list of jobs that will show you essentially whether or not the role you want to do can be sponsored. Okay. Establishing a genuine vacancy really is for the employer, not you as the employee. But what they would be looking to do is show that they've genuinely advertised, genuinely interviewed, and then genuinely hired the best candidate. So if it is a family member, for example, you need to be very, very careful that they have properly advertised that role, that they're not just giving you the job so that you get your visa. The Home Office are very, very good at spotting family relationships, and it doesn't mean the application will fail, but it does mean the application will face a higher degree of scrutiny. So you need to be very careful in those situations. And once you are a skilled worker, you're not stuck with that employer if you're not enjoying it, or if there is a better job offer somewhere else, but you will need to submit another application. And that means you won't get the immigration health surcharge back, and you won't get any refund or deduction for time remaining on your current visa. So if you are sponsored for 5 years, for example, that's really good, but you will spend more than £5,000 on the immigration health surcharge. And if you switch to a new employer, you won't be getting that money back. You'll need to spend it again on that new application. So it's something for you to consider as well. If you're going to be there for 5 years, great. If you're hoping to move on to a more senior role quite quickly, you may not want 5 years of sponsorship. You may want a shorter level of sponsorship. So what are your other options then? It says for graduates, this is also students. It doesn't mean just graduate route holders. It just means people graduating. So if you have a relationship with a British or settled migrant, you may be able to apply as a family member, so as a partner. Innovator founder, so you would need endorsement. There are 4 endorsing bodies. One of them is invitation only, so realistically there are only 3 endorsing bodies. You need a viable business plan, and your business needs to be nearly ready to go to market. If it's just an idea that is 3 years away, that's not the option for you. If you've been working on something as part of your undergrad or master's or PhD or whatever, and it is close to market, that is a good option for you potentially. Global talent, realistically, a student would only ever be global promise. What you need to show is that you are a future world leader in your field. You need endorsement, again, but you can be endorsed in all sorts of things. So from the arts to tech, software, mechanical engineering, whatever it is, you need a really good body of evidence to show that you're a future world leader. It is not just, oh, I got a distinction on my master's dissertation. It is, I am published, I am recognized, I'm working with industry leaders on this specific thing, and I am genuinely contributing. I'm not just bringing in coffee every morning as an apprentice, for example. So if you think you're global talent, do have a look at it. It's a very good route if you can get it. The endorsement application is quite cheap, and if you are refused, there's no impact on your immigration status. So as long as you're overall sorted, if you want to give global talent a go, do so. There's no negative, but just be aware it's very difficult for students to succeed without external experience. If you're just relying on what you've done as a student, you will likely fail. Other than that, some links. So graduate visa contains the requirements for the graduate visa. That's a Home Office government webpage. You'll see our services there. For us, skilled worker is the same as graduate, and then again, our services and advice there. And then what's called a white paper. These are the suggested changes for settlement. You'll see a more distilled report on our website. If you follow that, it will also link you to the full changes in the white paper if you want to have a look at that. So that's everything. I hope that was clear. I appreciate that's very, very quick. So if you do have any questions, you could post them in the Q&A or the chat, and then Javi and I will be able to answer them for you. I think, okay, they're flying in now. Great. Javi, do you want to just alternate? I'll take the first one. Will there be a buyback for EU citizens? We don't anticipate any buyback for EU nationals. Obviously, depending on when you started living in the UK, you may have access to the EU settlement scheme, but simply being an EU national, we don't anticipate will lead to any buyback on settlement. The whole point of Brexit, which we, for the record, completely disagreed with, is that EU nationals will be treated the same as all other nationalities. So there's no differentiation in this.
Yeah, I will take the second one. So I see if you're planning to study for the SQE with an academy and also a master's degree from the same academy, the institution offers it as a package deal with a 12-month course length. Would this be suitable for a graduate visa, or will I need another student visa? So I see that there is mention of a master's degree. I might be wrong here, Joel, but I think you should need a student visa because you're at the end of the day you're doing a master's degree, isn't it? So that's a sponsored level of studies.
Yeah, I think with that one, Laura, you would need the student visa to study that because you're doing something that requires study sponsorship. And then Kofi says, will this work for distance learning students who are outside the UK? I suspect that's referring to the graduate route and the requirement to be inside the UK. Ultimately, no. So if you are studying remotely, so as part of the university but studying from abroad, you will not meet that requirement to have been inside the UK for at least 12 months of the course. So if your entire time is outside the UK, then no, you would not be eligible as a graduate. If you have spent some time in the UK and you're currently outside the UK, you may be eligible as a graduate. So
I see there is a question in the chat.
Yeah, if you want to ask by voice as well, if you put your hand up, we'll come to you when we finish whatever relevant question we're doing.
Yeah. I got my degree changed in my first year from accounting finance to mathematics for accounting and finance, but my classmates has the degree before changing. So this is the change in names, I understand. Also, my degree was 4 years degree, but because I did not get placement, my degree shortened to 3 years. And after graduation, will have 1 more year left in my visa. And I work full time on that extra year. So, well, Salim, this is what we were telling in the slides. Basically, what we are seeing the Home Office does is that the moment the university confirms a person has finished the studies, even if it's before the expiry of the date of your student visa, they just curtail whichever time you have left. So I think it's not likely you will have it. It really depends on how, whether or not they do this and they curtail, they confirm that you have finished and therefore UKVA curtails your visa. I think that's likely what will happen. And so the moment you complete your studies, the best way to go forward if you want to work full time, just right after, I would just graduate and don't risk any curtailment or anything like that.
Yeah, Nolene's also put something for the university below that you'll need to do. But yes, so technically you can work full time because you'll be outside of your course. You shouldn't, because your visa may be curtailed very, very quickly. And also, you need to check what your certificate actually says your term time is. Just because your course ultimately shortened, your sponsorship may still have a term time date for you. So you saying, oh, well, I've finished my course doesn't mean you're necessarily out of term time. So you need to check the CAS. And then, as Javi says, technically, yes, you can work full time if you're outside of your term dates. However, you want to apply as a graduate, because ultimately what you want is to be working in the UK, and that's what the graduate visa is for. Yeah, your visa status won't change just because you've informed the university, Saad, but the university will then inform the Home Office, who will then take steps to curtail your leave. So it's best if you do that proactively and switch to a different route. So Dia says course ends this year. Student visa to January, does it mean it will be curtailed? So curtailment is not automatic. Curtailment as a general thing is something the Home Office does either when someone has breached the terms of their visa, so the visa is being taken away, or when the basis for their visa has finished. So a student who finishes early no longer needs a student visa, so they will face curtailment. Now, curtailment has to be actioned by the Home Office. Someone in the Home Office has to review and action the curtailment. It's not an automatic thing. It's not done by a computer. What this means, dear, for you, most likely you won't face curtailment simply because the gap between September and January is so small, the Home Office won't get round to it. Yes, in theory, they could curtail it. And we always tell people that once they finish their course, you need to submit a new application, and you shouldn't travel, because if you're outside the UK when your visa is curtailed, then it curtails instantly. Normally, curtailment, you get granted 60 days, but if you're outside the UK, it curtails instantly. And you should be looking at your next application. So once you've finished in September, even though you do have until January, you should be looking to become a graduate, a skilled worker, a global talent, whatever it is. And you don't get a refund. This is now to Nico. You don't get a refund on your IHS. The only time you get a refund on your immigration health surcharge is if you paid too much and were granted a shorter amount of time. If you're granted 2, 3, 4 years, even if you only use one of them before switching, you don't get a refund. It's one of the very unfair bits of our immigration system. So we're on to Delphine now.
Yeah, I can take it.
Yeah,
It's
go
possible
for it.
for me to request a visa extension for my PhD program before my contract concludes in September. So how will this affect my future application for a graduate visa? Additionally, will I need to pay a visa extension for your PhD program before your contract concludes in September? So I'm guessing that you're already as a PhD student. Well, this is something that I think maybe you'll know better,
Yeah,
but I think
I'll
this is
jump in.
something.
So you can get your doctorate extension, Delphine. That's fine. It does affect your ability to move to the graduate visa. So it will remove the graduate visa as an option for you. But remember, if you haven't completed your PhD course, you can't apply to become a graduate anyway. So if you need the additional time to complete the PhD, then you're looking at the doctoral extension application. And yes, health surcharges are payable on every extension. They're paid, for those of you that don't know, the immigration health surcharge is paid in 6-month blocks. So even if you were only getting an extension of 1 week, you would still pay for 6 months. If you got 6 months and a day, you would pay for a full year. So yes, it will affect your future application as a graduate, but if you need that time to finish the PhD, you don't have any options. You would need to extend your visa anyway. Nico has helpfully answered about the immigration health surcharge. Thank you, Nico. Dia is asking, yes, you would essentially waste that 1 year, but you can't apply for a shorter time as a graduate visa anyway. Dia. So if you move to a graduate and then move to a PhD, you will be paying full price for both applications. There's no discount, there's no carryover provision. So ideally, you would set up your PhD program while you're still a student, so you can apply straight into that PhD program rather than using the graduate. The other thing that you can't do is once you've been a graduate, you can't go back to being a graduate. It's a time limited route. More questions in the Q&A. Sorry, everyone was in the chat, weren't they? Let's go back to the Q&A.
Yeah.
Where did we start from? We finished with Laura. So can 26 plus candidates be eligible under new entrant conditions? They can be if you're applying as a student. So students and new entrants. Global talent is a PhD and publications enough. So you don't need a job for the global talent route. Global talent requires you to show that you are a future world leader in your area. So most likely what they will be doing is looking at your publications and whether or not you're first author, second author, and also the nature of the publication. So I don't know for social sciences, but if you consider Nature as a biology publication, that's a like a AAA kind of publication. It's a very good publication. That's much better than a kind of like paper factory journal where you are paying to be published. So it's a sliding scale ultimately. Jinmei says key difference. So it's 20 hours a week during term time, Jinmei, basically.
Is there any limit? Yeah, there is no limit in the number of days you can live outside the UK? Well,
not for an extension application. For different applications, there are residence requirements.
Exactly.
But as long as you've studied in the UK for at least 12 months of your course, you'll be eligible for a graduate visa.
Yeah.
I'll see who that's naming.
Yeah, Chavez is distance learning student. Well, this is
yes,
what you need to be in the UK for 12 months inside so if you're a distance learning student but you've been here at least 12 months, you should be able to do graduate. If you want to do a skilled worker visa and you have not been here in the UK at all, you will need to apply for an entry clearance. And do I have to apply for student visa to be able to live in the UK while doing my PhD? Yes. You are doing the PhD in distance, I understand. Yeah,
Yes,
sounds like
you'll need to rely on the certificate to apply for a student visa to come and live in the UK.
and then graduate if you are here for 12 months. Yeah, you will be eligible then.
Yeah, there's quite a few people asking about September 26th until January 27. So as standard, you get an additional 4 months at the end of your visa, which is why the September to January date is appearing in several questions. There is no right answer to when you should apply. Generally, though, if you are going to be applying as a skilled worker, you want to apply as soon as possible. The reason is your 5 years to settlement will start quicker. If you wait for 4 months, then you've just got an extra 4 months until you can settle. If you're applying as a graduate, there is less time pressure, but remember, you can't work in a permanent position until you have submitted your application. So if you do have a job, yes, you can work full time because you've completed your course, but you can't work in a permanent position until you've submitted your application. So for both graduate and skilled worker, generally there is no advantage to delaying the application. The only reason you might choose to delay it is because you have travel booked and you cannot travel with an outstanding application. To do so withdraws that application. So if you know you have to go back to a different country for 1 or 2 weeks or whatever, you might wait until you return before submitting an application. But if you don't have travel booked, we would generally tell people to apply as soon as they are able, because it is simply the best option for them. It also gives you more time to challenge refusals if for whatever reason you are refused. So it's just something to do. Moving back to the chat. Skilled worker visa. Yeah, that Priyanka, that's just the purpose of the whole presentation. So if you look at the slides, you'll see the differences. Anything else? Just looking at the time, we're nearly drawing to an end.
I just want to check if the question's been covered about can 26 plus aged applicants or candidates on the graduate visa, are they eligible under the new entrant condition for skilled visa if they're above the age of 26?
Yeah, I think so. So
my understanding was it was under the age of 26 and or I think there was
or it's an or, not an and. So if you're under 26, you are a new entrant, like full stop, done, easy. If you're over 26 but applying with a student visa, a graduate visa, or a most recently granted student or graduate visa, so it can have expired within the last 2 years, you will also be a new entrant. So you can be a 60-year-old new entrant if you've studied an undergraduate degree as a student. So it's an or, not an and. But yeah, if you are a 21-year-old undergraduate, don't worry, you're under 26. That's really easy. If you are coming off a student visa as a PhD student, you might be 30, you are still a new entrant for that purpose. The key thing with new entrants is that it's a maximum of 4 years of sponsorship, and the time you've spent as a graduate counts towards those 4 years. So you need to be very careful when your employer is issuing your costs that your sponsorship is for the correct amount of time, that it doesn't just automatically default to 4 years.
Fantastic. And I think this is the last question we can take, and this is just for clarification. And I think this happens to more PhD students than we're aware of, where they may not finish their PhD within the time originally applied for, and they may need to extend their visa. Would that impact their success of getting the graduate route visa as long as they complete their PhD successfully?
I think, sorry, I'm just trying to check this now. I think you're ineligible if you've used the doctorate extension. Let me see if I can find the reference in the rules for you.
So they're on their PhD, they're studying, they're on a student visa. They have been, so let's say they to finish their PhD in 3 years on their student visa, but they may need to extend their student visa. Would the extension of a student visa impact their eligibility for the graduate route? As long as they still successfully complete their PhD?
Not if, so no, you can extend your student visa. That's fine.
Yeah.
You're still a student. You need to show academic progression, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But if you are specifically extending on the doctorate extension scheme, then you are ineligible as a graduate.
Yeah.
But if you're extending as a student, and this will be based, it's Delphine that's asking, it's based on the application that you submit, it's based on your certificate of acceptance for studies. If you are a student, then yes, you're eligible as a graduate. If you are needing to use the doctorate extension scheme, then you will be ineligible as a graduate.
Yeah, brilliant. And anything again to do with your student visa, if you do have questions, I've put the links in the chat to our visa and immigration team at the university who can answer all of your questions about your visa. So do check in with those. And then also there are appointments available with Latitude Law, who we're presenting today, that you can also book, and that information is on the portal, so you can see on Ask where those appointments are available and who to email to book those. So I will share those in the chat. But yeah, we're finishing bang on time. Thank you both. It's a lot to get covered in an hour, but I felt like that was really accessible and really informative. And if there is any confusion, the recording will be available tomorrow on the LUMS Careers YouTube channel. So do subscribe if you want to be notified of when the upload comes live. But we do really appreciate both of your insights and expertise and taking the time to share that with us.
Yeah, no problem. And good luck everyone that needs to make applications. I know it's not a nice process to go through.
It's not. Yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Brilliant.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Nalin. Bye now.
Bye bye. Thanks, Nalin. Bye bye.